Hey folks, welcome to week 7. There's a couple things I wanted to go over from last week, just by way of review, clarification, that sort of a thing before we jump into an overview of this week's lesson. So the first thing that I wanted to look at were a few translations that we have built up to after going through lesson 23. These are translations that incorporate participles, and so I've got a few of them here that I just want to walk through to kind of clarify any misunderstandings or confusions about how to translate these participles. And so we've got, I think, 5 here that we're going to look at. All right, so this first sentence, we start off with ra'a. We recognize ra'a as the lexical form of a verb that we've learned. So that means that this is Cal Perfect 3MS. And this verb means he saw. All right, so we expect after a third-person verb, if we're going to have an explicit subject, that's usually going to come immediately after the verb. And so we get hamelech. Hamelech is masculine singular, so that matches, or it agrees with the verb, so this is likely going to be our subject. Hamelech, we've got the definite article, he patak dagesh. Take that off, we get king. The king would be then our subject. The king saw. What did he see? Very next phrase that we have here is et ha-niv'im. Et tells us that this next word is going to be our definite direct object. So our subject is king, or the king, and the object of the verb is the prophet. So this says the king saw the prophet, and then we get ha-kotivim. So here we've got kotivim. This is a participle. We recognize it as a participle because it has adjective or noun ending, hirik yod mem, so it's going to be masculine plural, on a verbal root, kaf tet vav. So this verbal root means right, or to write, and we know that it's a participle because it has that adjectival masculine plural ending plus a holum in R1. And so this is basically going to be translated as writing, or the writing one, the writing something, but we have to figure out what it's modifying. Is this a substantival participle where it's just functioning as a noun itself? Is this a predicative participle that is asserting something about another noun? Or is this an is this an attributive participle that is functioning as an adjective would to just describe another noun in the sentence? And the fact that it has the definite article tells us it's probably attributive. It matches in gender and number the noun that we saw right before, hirik yod mem, hirik yod mem. So this is probably modifying attributively the noun prophets. So what kind of prophets did the king see? The king saw the writing prophets, but that's not the end. We've got the writing prophets in the be. This should have a dagesh here. We would have basically a bait preposition on top of the definite article, which is attached to sifrim. So bait is going to be in, then we have the with our definite article. Sifrim is going to be the plural form of sefer, which is scrolls. Now when you see this prepositional phrase here in the scrolls, you have to realize that the bait is not modifying the verb, which we're used to seeing. Where did the king see the prophets? Instead, it's modifying the participle, ha-kotivim. Where were they writing? He saw the prophets who were writing. He saw the prophets, the writing ones, but this basifrim, this is also part of the attribution of the participle here. What kind of prophets did he see? The writing in the scrolls kind. So an easy way to translate this would be the king saw the prophets who were writing in the scrolls. The idea is writing in the scrolls, hakotivim ba sifrim, is a description. That whole phrase is a description of the prophets. So ba sifrim is not telling us where the king saw the prophets, it's telling us where the prophets were writing. The king saw the prophets who were writing in the scrolls. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense for you. If you have any questions about that, if you missed something on your translation of this, let me know. I'm happy to go a little bit more in depth with you if you need to. All right, so for this next one, we've got our first word here is actually a noun. It's hamelech, the king. And then we've got ha-rasha after it. Rasha, this is an adjective, means guilty or wicked, and it matches in gender and number, hamelech. It's also matching in definiteness. There's not another noun here that would seem to be the modified noun of the adjective, so we're probably connecting hamelech, ha-rasha together. The wicked king, or the guilty king. And then we get a participle, kotev. Now this participle, this does not have a definite article on it. And so since it doesn't have a definite article, it's probably not functioning attributively. This is either a substantival participle or it's a predicative participle. And we have to ask, are there any other nouns that this is functioning in relationship to where it's predicating something? It's masculine singular, but we've also seen we've got a masculine singular noun in hamelech. So since there's not some other verb in this sentence that kotev would be the subject of, or something else that it would be the object of, it's not the object of a preposition, this is probably a predicate noun that is predicating something about hamelech. So the wicked king is writing. All right. Now here we've got a definite direct object, et ha-sefer. Ha-sefer here, this is the scroll. So he, or the book or the document, the wicked king is writing. Writing what? Writing the document or the book or the scroll. La navi. Now here, navi has a typo. I think this should be a kametz, but that shouldn't throw you off too much. We've got a lamed preposition covering up a definite article. We've got the patak dagesh here. And so this is for the prophet. You could say to the prophet if you like. For the prophet, ha-yoshev. So ha-yoshev, this is a participle as well with a definite article. Hey patak dagesh, if we take that off, yoshev is from yashav. Yashav is he dwelt. So yoshev would be dwelling. All right. But if it's modifying navi, it's going to be for the dwelling bavayit, dwelling in the house prophet. And so again, here, this whole phrase, ha-yoshev bavayit, this is going to be modifying navi. All right, so this entire phrase is attributive to navi here. So the way that you would translate this into English would be for the prophet who is dwelling in the house, or for the in the house dwelling prophet. Something to keep in mind here is the idea that the participle conveys continuous activity. You don't want to say something like the king, the wicked king wrote the book or the document. You don't even really want to say the wicked king writes or will write. You want this idea of continuousness from the participle. The wicked king is writing the document. For the prophet who is dwelling, the prophet dwelling, or the dwelling in the house prophet. What you don't want to say is the prophet that dwells in the house, or the prophet that dwelt in the house. It's possible that you could translate ha-yoshev here as the prophet who dwells in the house. That's not necessarily incorrect, but I want you to use that ing translation right now to help your brain see that this participle is continuous activity. It's ongoing. So I want you to use an ing translation here where possible to communicate that if you translated this as the prophet who dwelt in the house, that's just not a translation of the participle. That presupposes that you have some sort of perfect verb. So all that to say, what we want to remember is that the participle doesn't convey tense, it conveys kind of action. In this sense, ongoing action. All right, the next one here, sane. Sane is going to be, again, a lexical form of a verb that we've learned. We've learned sane as he hates or he hated. And then we have ha'ish. This is a noun, so it may be functioning as the subject. This is the slot right after the main verb. This is the slot where we would expect to find an explicit subject if we have one for a third-person verb. So here, the man hates or hated. What does he hate? Et ha-susot. So here, et tells us whatever word comes next, this is your definite direct object of the main verb. So the man hates ha-susot. This is the definite article here. Hey, patak dagesh, take that off. We get susot, which is the feminine plural form of sus, which means horse. So here we have the man hates the horses, or it could be the man hates the mares, if you want to use that English translation. But we've also got a definite article on a participle that matches or agrees with our noun, our direct object. So what kind of horses or mares does the man hate? He hates the mares dwelling in the city. All right, he hates the mares who dwell, the mares that dwell, the mares which dwell, the horses dwelling in the city. The dwelling in the city horses are the ones that he hates. So again, this whole phrase here is attributive to ha-susot. So if you translate it as the horses that lived in the city or the horses that dwelt in the city, again, that's a past tense translation that is not ongoing, is not progressive or continuous. So that ongoing translation would be more the horses that are dwelling, or the horses that are living. The horses dwelling in the city, the horses living in the city, that's fine. The horses that dwell in the city, or the horses that dwelt in the city, that I want to avoid for participles. Next, we've got ha lahu. I don't think that there should be a dagesh here, because this is going to be the CalPerfect 3CP form of halach. So this would be they went. Again, that's third person, so we expect that if we have an explicit subject, that's going to be the next word in the sentence. And we get shofate ha'ir. So shofate is going to be the masculine plural construct form of shofate, which is a participle. Now, this participle, we could ask, is it substantival, is it predicative, or is it attributive? So far, there's no other noun for it to be attributive with, and you might say, well, what about ha'ir? Well, first of all, it's in construct with ha'ir, so you're not going to have an attributive adjective in construct with anything. Secondly, if we think maybe it's predicative, we might think that because we don't see a hey, we don't see a definite article, and a predicative participle is usually not going to have an article. The problem is the reason why it doesn't have an article is because it's in construct. Remember, construct nouns do not take the article even when they're definite. And this is definite because it's in construct with a definite noun. And remember, the definiteness of the construct depends on the definiteness of its absolute. So here, shofate is going to be definite. It's just in construct with another noun. Finally, we've talked about how if a participle is in construct, that's almost certainly substantival, because substantives are the only thing that really go in construct. So we're going to take this as a substantival participle, which basically means we're going to translate it like a noun. All right, so how are we going? What sort of noun do we have here? Well, the root is shafat. Shafat means he judged in the CalPerfect 3MS. Here it's in the participle form and it's plural. So here it would be the ones who judge, or the ones who are judging. The judging ones. We could simply say the judges. So here, when we've got a participle and it's substantival, it's harder to bring out that continuous aspect in English if we're going to use a noun. If we use a relative clause, or a relative phrase like the ones who judge or the judging ones, that's easier to bring out the ing idea, the ongoing idea. But if you translate shofte as judges of the city, you can't really make judges continuous. So that's fine. Judges is an appropriate translation here. The judges of the city went. Then our lamed preposition is going to tell us probably the destination to which they went. To lamed. And then we've got a definite article here with the patak dagesh, to the mizbeach. All right, so we've got a dagesh here where we probably shouldn't have one. We've got a dagesh missing where we should have one. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can still see here. Mizbeach is altar. And so we've got the judges of the city went to the altar. You might have something like the city's judges, or that's fine as well. But the judges of the city went to the altar is the translation here. Finally, our last one, we've got ha-kohen. So here we're beginning with a noun. Ha-kohen is going to be the priest. Then we've got zoveach. So zoveach, this is a participle form. We see the holam sere pattern here. And the only reason we have this patak is because the guttural chet, it really likes an A-class vowel, and so it tries to sneak that patak in there for the sake of pronunciation. So this is the participle form of zavach. Zavach is he slaughtered in the CalPerfect 3MS. And so this would be slaughtering, would be how we would translate this participle as a participle. We have to then ask, how is this participle functioning? Is it attributive? Probably not, since it doesn't have a definite article. Is it substantival? That would be possible, except we've got another noun here, and anytime you get two nouns in a row in Hebrew that aren't in construct, it gets a little fuzzy. So this is actually a predicative participle. It is predicating or asserting something about ha-kohen. So ha-kohen is zoveach, sacrificing. The priest is sacrificing or slaughtering. Bavayet, in the house, ha-tov, the good one, in the house, the good one. So here tov is an adjective. We have to ask, how is it functioning? Is it substantival? the good one in the house, the good one. Well, then we have the house, the good one. How do those nouns relate to each other? It's probably not substantival. If it were predicative, it would probably lack the article, and it would probably precede the noun that it's modifying. So what about attributive? How would this work attributively? Do we have another masculine singular noun? Well, by it here would be masculine singular, so this would be the good house. And so in English, we use an attributive adjective in the following way. We start with the article, if it's articular, then the adjective, then the noun. So instead of bavayet hatov, we would say the good house, or in the good house. The priest is sacrificing in the good house. Now here, when we have house, bayit, in relationship with sacrifice, we're probably talking about the house of a deity. And so temple would be an appropriate translation here. The priest is sacrificing in the good temple. All right, so that's it as far as translation, what I wanted to go over from lesson 23. A couple other things that I want to clarify that we've gone over before. The difference between haya with a hey and kaya with a chet. I know that a lot of students get these two confused. One is because hey and chet are very similar, but the other thing is sort of coincidental. The meanings are kind of connected, at least in our mind. We've translated haya as he is or he was, and kaya as he lives or he lived. And you can see how to be and to live are related, but these are definitely different nouns that mean different things. Haya has the idea of happening or occurring or becoming or coming into being. That's related to happening. Now, if we think of a person coming into being, well, then we think of them becoming alive, and we can see the connection there. But kaya is specifically related to the idea of life. A life or a living thing would be kaya or kai or kayim. These are all words for something that is alive. So this chet here, you need to kind of connect the idea of living thing or being alive into your translation. Don't translate kaya as is or was. Similarly, don't use alive or lived with haya. You want to make sure that you're distinguishing between these two. All right, so my silly old mnemonic for haya was, and it's really dumb, but it was like something like, haya, I want to be, haya, I want to become a ninja. So again, I want to be or become a ninja. It's not about being alive, it's about becoming something. I don't have a good mnemonic for kaya, other than to say that it's related to, if you're familiar with the toast, l'chaim, that's a Hebrew toast, l'chaim. L'chaim means to life. And so maybe you can associate that if you're familiar with that Hebrew toast. But keep these separate in your mind. Finally, some of you are having a hard time consistently labeling the infinitive construct versus the infinitive absolute. There are a lot of you who are on the quizzes calling an infinitive construct an infinitive absolute, and calling an infinitive absolute an infinitive construct. Remember, the construct is, think of it like it's constricted, it's contracted, it's a shorter form. And so the construct is going to have the reduced vowel in R1 here, the shava, or the hatef vowel, as it may be if it's a guttural, for example. But the infinitive absolute is going to be the bulkier form. So it's going to have the kametz in R1. And sometimes it'll even have a holum vav instead of just a holum. So make sure that you remember that the infinitive absolute is the bulkier form. The infinitive construct is the more constricted or contracted form. It's going to have that reduced vowel in R1. All right, so that's it from last week. Hopefully that's helpful for you. If you have any questions about any of this, please let me know.